The ocean covers 2/3 of our planet and is believed to harbor the greatest wealth of biodiversity on the earth. But these watery ecosystems are threatened by climate change, pollution, and human behavior. Exactly how? We will show you later on in the show. In the meantime, welcome to Echoed Africa. I'm Neota Egbe, coming to you from Abuja, Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. This is what we have lined up for you today. In Egypt, we will catch up with local experts and some German scientists that have teamed up to grow forests in the desert. Then we'll visit a brewery where a simple idea is saving huge quantities of energy in Germany. And in South Africa, we meet the black-footed penguin, whose habitat is at risk. Let's go to North Africa, Egypt to be precise. Fertile land is scarce here, and the mighty Nile River is a source of survival. About 85 million Egyptians are settled along its banks, and the rest of the country is considered a desert. Local scientists have teamed up with experts from Germany to find a way to grow trees in the desert using treated sewage. Strange, but true. The aim is to establish sustainable forestry on the arid lands, thereby reaping ecological and economic rewards. Let's see how it's done.
They are bringing life into inhospitable terrain. A forest has sprung up miraculously here at Ismailia, a 2 hours drive from Cairo. Today, workers are planting young pine trees. The forest is a research collaboration between Egypt and German scientists.
On the one hand, you have the advantage over places like Germany that there's no winter here that could interrupt growth. On the other hand, we have some very fast-growing species available locally, like eucalyptus. So altogether, we have some very impressive growth.
Provided, of course, there's enough water. In Egypt, it doesn't often fall from the sky, so it needs to be pumped to the trees. Hani El Khateb is one of the creative minds behind the project. The Egyptian-born forestry scientist works at Munich's Technical University. He goes back to Egypt several times a year to keep tabs on the project.
These are the irrigation hose pipes. Without them, all the trees would die.
The water comes from the nearby sewage treatment plant. Using mechanical and biological processes, it cleans the wastewater from Ismailia. Total purification would cost a lot more. This way, some nitrogen compounds like nitrate remain in the water. In fact, they are the perfect fertilizer for trees, but some toxins may remain. So the water isn't clean enough to irrigate edible plants, but it's certainly sufficient for building or firewood. In addition, the forest protects against sand drifts and generate jobs badly needed in rural areas.
It needs to be worthwhile to continue afforestation to make it economically viable. Otherwise, we can't achieve sustainability here. And that's why we're also planting valuable wood here.
Many questions need to be explored. Which types of trees are the most suited to the environment? And what is the most effective irrigation system? But one thing is already clear. Thanks to the intense sunlight and the many nutrients in the wastewater, trees here grow 4 times faster than in Germany.
4,2, 5,6.
The Germans are impressed.
There are many regions with similar social and climatic conditions. This really has the potential to be an exemplary project for other regions.
240 hectares have been reclaimed from the desert, and it may just be the beginning. In the upcoming years, more than 500,000 hectares of desert sand could be planted with this phenomenal forest.
Yes, indeed. The bulk of the population of Nigerians in the rural areas are mainly farmers. They may be doing it just to feed but they also need to know and understand the earth, care for it, to get the best from it. Here comes The Savior, our community radio service that educates and entertains.
Our radio drama this week talks about mixing browsers and grazers. Please listen, learn, and send us feedback.
Nnaemeka Ikegwonu is the brains behind the radio initiative to reach out to Nigeria's farmers and teach them about sustainable farming methods. Smallholder Farmers Rural Radio reaches 3,300 listeners in around 6 communities in southeastern Nigeria.
In the area of the right practice, the right spacing of crops is something that is very relevant. It's part of the things we teach farmers on radio, how to apply fertilizer and when to apply fertilizer. We are teaching farmers different methods in post-harvest management of grain.
Agriculture accounts for just over 20% of Nigeria's GDP, but 70% of the country's working population is employed in the sector. One major problem farmers say is flooding.
This flood issue, in fact, it has been a problem because of weather changes. As we all in Africa witnessed some years ago that things are not moving as expected. On that note, it affects agric.
61-year-old farmer Paul Anyim cultivates mainly yam, rice, and cassava on his 3-acre farm in Ebonyi State in southern Nigeria. Even with the crude method of farming he's employed, he's able to produce 40 to 50 bags of rice every year. But he says financing is the problem.
The problem of farmers in Nigeria is nobody supporting them with finance. Nobody. If they bring the finance, those really there on the table, we go and share that money. No one will reach our hand.
As well as broadcasting from the station, Ikegwonu goes out to hear what the people think. He's convinced that since he started his radio show in 2007, he's had a positive influence on people's actions.
In doing this work, one thing I have identified is the strength of community decision. When a community comes in and says that everybody comes in by 10 p.m., in a community, people rebel against that law, but everybody at the end of the day sticks to it.
In addition to knowledge about fertilizers, seeds, and weed killers, Nigerian farmers need to understand climate change and improving techniques for sustainable farming, which are part of the Smallholder Farmers Rural Radio offering.
And now to an idea that you could try at home. The English town of Todmorden, which is located in the rolling hills some 300 kilometers from London, has become one large vegetable garden. The community initiative, known as Incredible Edible, and I like the sound of that, has successfully motivated large numbers of the local population not only to help, but also to pick and eat as well. And all of this without any money changing hands. Now this time, a whole town is doing its bit for the environment.
Todmorden in England is going through an incredible edible revolution. It was started 8 years ago by pensioners with a passion for gardening. Wherever they find free space in town, they plant vegetables. Anyone can help with the gardening, and anyone can harvest and
against the backdrop of rising energy prices and a growing need to be competitive on a global scale, sustainable energy use has become a key issue in Nigeria, Africa, Europe, you might say. Now, companies seem to have an environmental consciousness dubbed green and sustainable, which is something that consumers sometimes are willing to pay a little extra for. And as a result, profits rise. Well, at a traditional brewery in Germany, that very scenario prompted an investment in new technology that helps to save fresh water and energy. It's a good environmental idea that could inspire others to follow suit.
The aroma inside the brewery is sweet and somewhat bitter. That's the malt, says master brewer Guido Sattelmeier. Malt is critical for the beer's taste and colour. It has to age in the tanks for about 3 weeks before it's ready for market. And how is it? Finished, full of flavour, very good. Now we can bottle it. Not only does the brewing process take a lot of time, but lots of energy too. Especially in the mash house, the heart of the brewery. Managing director Stefan Dittmar had an idea how to save energy during the mashing, or mixing of the malt and hot water. I used to have 2 heating sources. Now I only apply heating here and use the residual heat that would normally be lost. I collect it in this energy storage and reuse it for the mashing. That's new. It sounds really simple, but it's actually very complicated.
Das ist das Neue. Und das klingt zwar einfach, ist aber ganz, ganz kompliziert.
How much do you save that way? 30% or almost 500,000 kilowatt hours a year. That's a lot. The investment in the new technology ran about 300,000 euros. It should be covered in around 5 years. The machines in the mash house run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so no energy is ever lost. Breweries put out a great deal of energy. Stefan Dittmar is looking for yet more ways to save it. And not just for the sake of the environment, but to enhance his competitiveness as well. He's exasperated that the state gives rebates to companies that use more energy than he does. Granting rebates for wasting energy is not okay. They should be emphasizing energy-saving systems. Then we'll be on the right path. Saxony's family businesses turn out some 150,000 litres of beer each day. Some of it takes just a little more horsepower. Sometimes saving energy is quite simple, and no high-tech is required.
Now, standing inside a little stream in Abuja, but you know, we're talking climate change and the environment. There's not much of water bodies in Abuja. But guess what? As climate change, pollution, and uncontrolled industrial growth continues to destroy habitats around the world, scientists estimate 100 species are being wiped out every day. But many people are wondering how to protect our biodiversity. Now, one of our reporters traveled to South Africa to the coast near Story Point to meet conservationists trying to save Africa's only penguin species from extinction. The black-footed penguin is a charismatic little creature that has won a place deep in the human heart. See for yourself.
These penguins are having a rest after a long day looking for food. They spend hours out in the ocean every day hunting fish to feed themselves and their children waiting near the shore. The biggest colony of African penguins lives at the Stony Point Nature Reserve on the coast south of Cape Town. It is home to about 2,500 breeding pairs. Kewan McGeorge is a marine ranger and looks after the colony. He works for Cape Nature, the conservation authority for the Western Cape.
At this locality, we're the only colony that's actually growing. Most of the 27 other colonies, penguin colonies along our southern African coastline, most of them are in decline and some of them are even extinct.
He counts the penguins every week and takes a look at the chicks and the nests. The species is endangered. Every penguin counts.
1P2, adult 1P2. The species is struggling. The species, we call it a sentinel species. It's an indicator species of how healthy our ocean is. Basically looking at the biomass. If the biomass is poor, the species is going to struggle. Currently, we're looking at about 2%, 2.5% of the original stock of African penguin. We're down to, I think it's about 20-odd thousand pairs, breeding pairs.
Indirectly, tourism helps the penguins. Visitors can take boat rides to Dyer Island. It used to be the biggest breeding ground for African penguins. In the 1970s, there were 25,000 breeding pairs here, but the population has shrunk dramatically. A long-term problem has been the harvesting of guano. The penguins used to make burrows in it. Income from the boat trips helps fund a penguin and seabird sanctuary at Gans Bay on the mainland, with a rehabilitation center for the injured and sick.
He's got a seal bite wound, and then now we've just cleaned the wound. So he's going to be with us for 3 weeks, and then we'll release him as soon as he recovers. Now I'm about to feed him. Okay, check buddy.
When he is fit again, he can go back home. Out in the ocean, the penguins are on their own and are nearly impossible to protect. The fishing fleets are not concerned about the penguins' fate. If fish stocks continue to be depleted, the penguins will face starvation.
It's only us as humans that can become part of the solution. We the species that can make a choice. These guys don't have a choice. You know, big sea, big swell, they must go out and go and forage for their daily bread, basically. These guys are dedicated to survive, so yes, there's always hope. I think if we lose hope, we lose the essence of life.
Behind me is a built-up area. That means human activity is enormous. That also means CO2 emissions. Well, scientists have warned that marine life will be irreversibly changed unless CO2 emissions are drastically cut. The ocean provides us with food, energy, minerals, drugs, and half the oxygen in the atmosphere, and it regulates our climate and weather. Research also shows that the ocean has absorbed nearly 30% of the carbon dioxide we have produced since industrialization. The CO2 from burning fossil fuels is changing the chemistry of the sea. Let's take a look.
Bearing the scars of climate change, the increasing acidification of our oceans causes coralline algae to produce thinner, calcified skeletons. But what is making the sea more acidic? The answer is simple: carbon dioxide. It's well known that CO2 emissions are increasing atmospheric temperature, but some of those emissions are also absorbed by the world's oceans, over a third to be exact. Around 70% of the surface of the globe is covered by saltwater, which is also a gigantic reservoir of carbon dioxide. But increasing levels of CO2 are altering the water's chemical balance. What's happening? The carbon dioxide dissolves and reacts with the water to produce carbonic acid. This in turn acidifies the sea. By the end of the 21st century, scientists say pH levels will have dropped lower than at any other time in the 650,000 years that preceded the Industrial Revolution, with devastating impact for many types of coralline algae, but also for other marine animals such as cold water corals, sea cucumbers, and some species of tiny marine snails, Their shells can dissolve in acidic seawater. Scientists have supplied the proof. They simulated the concentration of absorbed carbon dioxide expected in our seas in the year 2100, and the aquatic snail's protective shell dissolved within 2 days. If these tiny creatures disappear, this will have a knock-on effect on other animals. Fish and seabirds would have to find new sources of food. And the acidification of the seas is also making them louder. Under normal conditions, vibrations, caused for example by breaking waves, are absorbed by minerals present in the water. This benefits marine life and keeps lines of communication clear. But acidification is diluting the concentration of these minerals, thereby increasing underwater noise levels. That, in turn, can disrupt animal communication. Researchers predict that ambient noise levels in the oceans will rise dramatically over the coming decades.
So when it comes to medical care, patients in poorer countries, including many parts of Africa, rarely have access to effective medication and therefore rely heavily on traditional healers who use herbal medicine. Many of the plants used by these traditional healers are of great interest to pharmaceutical companies. One of the superstars of these herbal medicine is the Mwiri tree, which grows in Kenya. There's a strong race which is on right now to unlock its potential before it is wiped out of existence.
The lives of Dorothy and Mary couldn't be more different. One is used to life in the city, the other in the village. But they're connected by their commitment to this tree. People here call it Mwiri, but its official name is Prunus africana. Its bark is used to make medicine for many illnesses, but primarily prostate cancer, which affects more than half of all men over 60.
Working on a species which is used in the treatment of cancer is of my interest. I lost my sister from breast cancer. I also lost my mom from uterine cancer. That's why I got an interest with cancer.
Dorothy is a biochemist in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. For her master's thesis, she studied the bark of Prunus africana, investigating the uses of its components for treating cancer. She wants to find out if there is a difference between trees that grow in the wild and those in an experimental nursery. About 100 kilometers from Nairobi, we accompany Mary Nyamburu, a conservationist and retired school teacher. She takes us on a stroll into the Aberdeen Mountains. While decades ago there were plenty of Mwiri trees, Mary says now you sometimes have to walk for several kilometers before you even encounter one.
I come to the forest to get the holdings. When the seeds are foreign and they have germinated, then we pick them and then we go and pot them.
This takes place in her own small nursery, which Mary has been operating for 10 years. She earns about €8 a month selling the trees. She's saving the money to pay her children's education. The Mwiri tree only grows at higher altitudes, above 1,500 meters. By now, the Prunus africana is on the endangered species list. People who live in the highlands need the wood to cook and build. They also gain farmland by clearing out the trees. It's taken 17 years for trees at this test plantation of the World Agroforestry Center to get this tall. Dorothy and her colleagues are taking back samples of the experiments. Her research helps not only medicine, but might also provide jobs.
When you have more of the trees being domesticated, since the bark is of high value, we can advocate for farmers to export it because it has already market in the Europe for production of the herbal drugs.
Today, it's time to plant Mary's Mwiri trees that have been growing in her nursery for 6 months. Together with people from the surrounding villages, Mary wants to turn this meadow back into a forest.
My wish and my hope is to see this forest as big as it was 20 years ago.
It will take some time before the forest grows back to its former glory. It's not likely to happen during Mary's time.
but she and the villagers will keep up their work nevertheless.
And that's a wrap on our show for today. I want to thank you for being a part of it. You can also catch up on our coverage of the environment and other issues around innovations in green technology on our website. Also, join the conversations on our social media platforms. Tell us what you are doing, what your neighbor, your brother or sister is doing for the environment. So bring you another edition of the show. Bye-bye from Abuja, Nigeria.